Hey, thank you so much for watching, listening. Of course, I want you to subscribe because we have amazing content. And share this with your friends because it's great. And the jokes at the end are very, very uplifting. A lot of tongue in cheek with that one. But we're finishing our series called Sheep, Shepherd, and Shams. Right? We're finishing this series. It's been an interesting series. Started off talking about the context of the series coming from John chapter 9, and then it goes all the way through John chapter 10, verse 21. And the context of this is a conversation, and it's basically a conversation between Jesus and Pharisees, religious leaders. And I bring this to your attention because some of us have religious training, upbringing, background. And you say, well, I'm not a leader. I'm not a pastor, an usher, whatever, small group leader. I'm just, a Christian, which is fantastic. But I think we all need to take a pause in a moment and consider that there might be some stuff in us that is religious that Jesus might be speaking to in us. And so this conversation, I found it really amazing to think and consider that Jesus has a conversation. And in the midst of this conversation is the whole sheep and shepherd thing that Jesus says, my sheep know my voice, voice of a stranger they won't follow. And I've quoted that verse for years. I mean, since I was probably 10, I've heard all of that, Sunday school, the whole thing. But when I think about it in relation to a conversation with religious people, I think it's really important for us to think. And you might say, well, I'm not religious. And maybe, but I know for myself, I've thought that in the past, and Holy Spirit's really talked with me and said, you are religious, Sarah. You're religious in these ways. And I was like, eesh, I don't want to think of myself that way, but Holy Spirit leads us into truth, even though we may not like all the truth about ourselves more than anything. So I think it's just important to think about, to consider, and to look and see, is there any religious influence, any echoes in our lives that Jesus might be talking about with us as it relates to this conversation? So the conversation starts with the Pharisees asking Jesus a question. Are we blind? And Jesus answers their question. He answers it and talks about, you say that you see, but in actuality, because you say that you see, your sin remains. And then he starts talking about anyone who comes into the sheep pen, other than through the door, is a thief and a robber. Then he keeps going, he's like, but the shepherd calls his sheep by name and he leads them out. And they follow him because they know his voice. The voice of a stranger they don't follow. And then when you read in verse 6, so Jesus does kind of this explanation of these first 5 verses, actually 6 verses, in answer to this question, are we blind? That's the religious people asking. And I think it's important to ask the question that we could ask ourselves and ask Jesus, are there blind spots? Do I have blind spots? Do I think I see clearly and in actuality, it's just blind spots? I don't know about you, but when I drive and I have a blind spot, bad news, right? Especially when you try to change a lane. Ooh, there's somebody there. Oh, I didn't see that. Oh, I wasn't aware. And I think we all have had and do have blind spots. And unless we talk to Jesus, those blind spots continue. They're perpetuated without Jesus talking with us, Holy Spirit leading us and illuminating, removing the blindness. So they ask Jesus, are we blind? And then Jesus begins to talk and say, well, if you're following a thief, if you're following a robber, if anybody's leading you other than me, then you're probably going to have blind spots. And it's interesting to consider their response. Because in verse 7, the Pharisees, because again, it's a conversation, it's back and forth. They ask a question, Jesus answers. In verse 7, it says, this figure of speech, they didn't understand what Jesus was talking about. So they don't get it. And I don't know about you, but there are times I don't understand what Jesus is saying. It's unclear to me. I have questions. I don't get it. And even now, I've been doing this whole Jesus thing for quite a while, and I still have questions. I still don't understand everything. I don't claim to have landed or arrived. I want to be open to continually learn, to explore, to get more connected, aware of Jesus. And so their response, I think, could be yours and my response as well. I don't understand what you're telling me. And it's fine to say that to Jesus. Jesus doesn't get cranky when you say, I don't get it. Because, and I know that he doesn't get cranky, because the very next part from verses 7 through 18, Jesus expounds and explains even more what he started in verses like chapter 9, verse 41 through chapter 10, verse 6. So there's the question from the Pharisees, explanation from Jesus, another, I don't get it, I don't understand what you're telling me. So Jesus continues to explain. And in the second part of the explanation, he really expands what he's saying. I mean, he really expands it. He talks about the hireling. He talks about the wolf. He talks about us following Jesus, how Jesus, and I really like this. Jesus says, my sheep know me and I know my sheep. And the whole point of this whole deal is that we know Jesus, that we know Jesus and we are known by Jesus, that we follow him, that he calls you by name. He knows your name. He knows your identity. And he speaks that identity and calls that name. Says, I know you. And we know him. We know his voice. We know his presence. We know the goodness. We know the direction. We know what he does in our hearts and in our lives, in our thoughts, in our souls. That we know Jesus. And Jesus lays down his life for us. Nobody takes it from him. He lays down his life. And he talks about how he's connected with the Father. The Father loves me. I love my sheep. My sheep love me just as the Father loves me and I love the Father. I mean, there's this whole relationship and it really expounds and blows up and really grows and expands the whole idea of relationship and connection with Jesus. But again, I'm just bringing to your attention, this is a conversation. So it starts with a question from the Pharisees. Jesus answers the question. The Pharisees don't understand. I don't understand what you're telling me. Jesus expounds even more. But I want you to consider the final reaction. Because, like I said, a conversation is back and forth. It's dialogue. The final reaction of the Pharisees, the religious leaders who were listening, is very interesting. Because in verse 19, it says, a division occurred among the Jews because of Jesus' words. And many of them were saying, Jesus has a demon and he's insane. Why do we listen to him? And I think they say that because they don't understand what Jesus is telling them. And I think it's really important for us that if we do have religious upbringing background, that we don't diminish or dismiss what Jesus says or minimize it just because we don't understand it. We don't put Jesus' words in the crazy or less than attentive column, dismiss because I don't get it, I don't understand it, so I just kind of blow it off. Or I say that he's crazy. I don't think any of us would say he's crazy, but I could see some of us, and I know for myself, in the past, I have kind of minimized, I don't understand what Jesus is saying, so I'm just not going to pay attention to it. I'm just going to kind of dismiss it, blow it off. But I want us to be careful that we don't have that reaction. Because the other reaction, because remember there's a division, the other reaction is verse 21, and they say, these are not the sayings of one who is demon-possessed. Jesus isn't demon-possessed because a demon cannot open the eyes of the blind. And it's going all the way back to chapter 9 when Jesus healed the man who was born blind. And just because we don't always understand what Jesus is saying doesn't mean that we dismiss, disqualify, or kind of put him on the shelf. Let's continue to recognize that Jesus heals us, restores us, can lead us. And just because we don't always understand, and we may not understand where Jesus leads us from time to time. I find that following Jesus oftentimes makes more sense in hindsight than in the actual moment. But let's be committed to follow Jesus no matter what. Let's make our reaction, instead of dismissing or minimizing or kind of blowing off Jesus, let's make our reaction, I don't understand, but I still know he's good. I still know he's the shepherd. I still know he heals, he restores, and he loves like nobody else. So thank you so much for watching, listening. Thank you for subscribing. Of course, hit the notification bell right there. That would be a fantastic way for you to stay posted when we put up new content. Here's a question for you to think about. We're coming into potential holiday time season. What's your favorite holiday of the whole year? I had a friend, she liked Groundhog Day because she didn't have to do anything. But some of us like Christmas, some of us like Easter. What's your favorite holiday in the whole year and why? Here's your concluding joke. Did you know that the longest word in the English language, what is the longest word in the English language? It is the word smiles, because the first and last letters are a mile apart. Smiles is a mile apart. You're like, that is super lame. I know, but next week will be lots better. Thanks.